please let me know, okay? Thank you. Dr. Sahel is with us right now. We will start today with Dr. Nabil Tarabishi. Dr. Nabil Tarabishi is PhD in mechanical engineering from 1994 from Wichita State University. And he graduated from Damascus University in mechanical engineering. He worked as engineering consulting in renewable energy. He's a research engineer at Ford Motor Company. He's visiting professor at Illinois Institute of Technology, teaching engineer. And he's worked for some Syrian organization too. And his astronomy and philosophy of science, and what is the relationship between science and society. Please, Dr. Nabil, if you can join us right now and talk to us about no compulsion in Islam and what do you think about it?
Jazakallah khair. I would like to thank everyone here, and especially brother Dr. Bassam for this opportunity. I would like to share with you some ideas I have written in an article I submitted for publication. It got stuck somewhere, but I hope that you will find it relevant and useful. The article was about the events that occurred in France recently. So I started with examining Macron's approach, which I think it was arrogant and inflammatory, and indicates a mentality of fear. And there is some implications. Sometimes it is even clear accusation for Islam and Muslims that Islam is not compatible with the values of free speech, for example. But what does Islam say about that? What does Quran say? What does Quran say about that? Professor Ghanouchi last week talked about the ayah, La ikrah fi din, no compulsion in faith. This is very central idea in the Quran, and it is not only in Surah Baqarah, it is in several places. For example, in Surah Al-Kahf, وَقُلُ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ, and say, the truth is from your Lord, and whosoever wants to believe, let him do so, and whosoever wants not to believe also is free to do it. And there are other places in the Quran. The concept of freedom of a person to believe what he wants, and consequently also it implies the freedom of speech. So this concept is very basic in Islam because upon it is built the concept of responsibility. So we have responsibility only for things that we control, for only things we choose in completely free will. So the day of judgment will be meaningless if we were forced to do everything. Then there's nothing really to report then because we were forced. So it is very important concept in Islam to have a person that has a free will. He will choose, and then on the day of judgment, he will answer for his choices, if it is good or bad. So, so there is really no problem with the concept of free speech. The only problem here is that where do you draw the line between free speech and and hurting and insulting others. It would be crazy to think that there is no limit, because suppose that you go into a theater and say and yell fire, this is not free speech. You will be prosecuted. So there are limits for everything in this universe, including speech. Now, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the border? Borders usually are flashpoints, but they can be, these lines can be drawn by thoughtful dialogue and discussion. So there is no need for confrontation. And the Muslims can benefit quite a bit by ignoring stupidity and ignorance. Case in point, the Muslim reaction to Salman Rushdie has created Salman Rushdie, really. If we did not have that emotional response, Salman Rushdie will be a virtual unknown, and nobody will really even hear about him or read his work. So our response has created this person. And also we have to think about our priorities. Now, a stupid drawing has caused all this, caused us really to rise and make lots of noises and anger. Now, but there is a whole people being prosecuted and erased, essentially erased in China, and nobody's really doing much about it. So we have really to pause and think about our priorities. What are our priorities here? The other thing that's, the other idea that I went through in the article is the responsibility of Muslim community, whether it's France or somewhere else, even in this country. There are some, these youngsters, these young Muslims, they feel that they are marginalized. They don't feel any sense of a mission. So who is the responsibility to take them out of this state and put them on the path of success? I think it is mainly the Muslim community responsibility to draw a mission and plans for these youngsters. They are the resource of our community and the society in which we live in. Take the Jewish model, for example. In the educational field, you'll see that they are overrepresented, especially in higher education. And we can do even better than them. We are not a closed group. So we have the ability to do more than them. And we have, even in theory, we love knowledge and providing knowledge, and we consider it as very high and desired thing to do. So we can draw plans for these youth to learn and then provide knowledge for for everyone. And it is essential for the survival of the communities, especially the minority. As a minority, we shouldn't depend on the protection of the law. We should depend on the goodwill of the people. When the people of the society feel that this particular group is very useful to the community, they will defend it, and they will stand with it at all times. We should provide and give a positive message and a hopeful future vision. That's all I want to share with you. Hope that these ideas give us something to talk about or discuss. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nabil. Brother Muhammad Hamid, he will talk next, and he's electrical engineering, graduated in 1994 from Birzeit University in Palestine. He worked for NASA for 6 years as engineering. And Brother Muhammad.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Dr. Nabil and Dr. Suhail, for all of the lectures that we've been listening to. And I consider myself as a student to Dr. Suhail, and I can't add any more. What is he adding? Was he providing? So this ayah, La ikraha fi din, this is what we learned from Dr. Suhail too. It's like the main ayat of Quran, the overarching goals of Islam. Actually, there's in Quran, there is few ayat. Of course, there's muhkam and mutashabih, but there is ayat like La ikraha fi din and ayat al-adl, يعني وقل اعدلوا. There is a few ayat in Quran that can be considered as a basic of or a base of constitution. They are very huge and they have a lot of weight in the mentality of the Ummah. But if we look at the application or the understanding of these ayat, we can notice like a trajectory or a curve. These ayat became less important, or actually they used the term nasikh. So it was changed from its meaning, the main meaning, to like limited application. So for ayat la ikraha fi din, we can we see in our modern life or in the history where people were prosecuted and killed or jailed because of their opinion. And sometimes it's from the same madhab or from different madhab or different religion. So how come they did not look at this ayah? If there is la ikraha fi din or no compulsory in Islam, then how come you come to people and judge them based on their opinions? Or if they change that's the main thing here. If somebody decided to change his madhab, we saw that in 2000, I think 11 or maybe before, no, after the Arab Spring in Egypt, one sheikh was killed because he switched to Shia in Egypt. I mean, that's something, not correct. Should not happen, should not be killed. Because there's like Rafidin, he can switch between madhab to other. But if you switch from Islam to other religion, then they use the hadith, man baddala dinahu faqtuluh. If you switch your deen, you will be killed. And they said this hadith specialized the ayah, but I don't think this should be the way. I mean, when we look at Quran, we should make Quran the highest priority. Hadith will be lower than that. And if there is contradiction between hadith and Quran, Quran is what we take Quran, and we don't take that hadith. I don't say don't take all of the hadith. No, only that particular hadith you cannot take. You should just put it on the side. So if we look at the history, I don't want to take a lot of time, but we see Muslims. The methodology of understanding Islam, I can characterize it by three schools of thought. We have the Salafi school, we have the traditional school, and we have the Maqasidi school. Maqasidi means the one who looks at the goals of Islam. And if we look at the history, when we have the Salafi in control, or even traditional, we saw the bloodshed and the killing, and even between the same madhab or different madhab between Muslims. And that actually affected other people and actually changed the look to Islam from others. So now what Dr. Nabil mentioned, what happened in France, it has roots. So we have to admit that. If we look at some definitions that based, or in the major school of thoughts of traditional and Salafi, they have what they call Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Kufr. And they have the definition of jihad. And if you look at definition of jihad, which to start the fight with other nations, if you are strong enough, you have to start. and go to them and force them either to take Islam. If not, you have to pay money. You have to pay money instead. And this tarif did not come in Quran, did not come in the application of Rasulullah, because I think the state of Muslims, the state, I mean, if they are in power, they were justifying how to control others. And because we didn't, after the Khulafa Rashidin, after the first 30 years, Islamic community or nation changed from becoming a shura or democracy to a dictatorship. So they have to justify their control of others. But when you are weak, you look at other side of Islam, and that's double standard. We have to have one standard. So other schools of thought, when they affected people or they spread between people, like Sufi like Sheikh Muhyiddin ibn Arabi or Ar-Rumi, Ibn Rumi, or Sahrawardi or Tabrizi. Look at Turkey. I mean, in the history, they spread these ideas, and actually in the subcontinent, in Pakistan and these areas, Islam actually spread there not because of force, not because of wars or jihad or anything. It's spread by these humble people, because the people look at them and they liked the way they were. So Sufi spread peace, tranquility, coexistence. And when we have the other school, which is, I would say, branched from the maqasid of Islam, the Sufi and the intellect. And we have the intellect like Ibn Rushd or Al-Mu'tazila. When they were in control, they were not in control as a government, but in control in the society, in the community. They spread innovation, civilization, science. So they were, Islam were different. That's why we said the golden ages of Islam, it was in the Abbasi and maybe Andalus. And after that, Islam went down and became a stagnant situation. That's what I have for this. Thank you for listening to me.
Assalamu alaikum. Dr. Suhail, you are up right now.
طيب بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. جزاكم الله خير Dr. Nabil and Brother Muhammad for this very enlightening remarks on a very fundamental subject that we may spend one session, 2 sessions on it, or even more, and it is worth it because of the consequences of the dealing with the Quran or interpretation of the Quran and our deen, and the mess that has been created because of that, so that things are confused. There is no clear distinction between what is a principle or value in Islam and what is a contextual rule that is to be applied in certain circumstances. Total mess raised a generation that is confused. And nowadays, young Muslims, they have very tough choices to make, as Brother Muhammad was mentioning, and Dr. Nabil before. Basically, is you either subscribe to one of those versions that are totally, they're not inspiring and they're not attractive, whether traditional or Salafi or political Islam or all of these now, they're not appealing to Muslims, to young people, or abandoning religion altogether. So we're talking about a whole generation in a very tough choice, and there is big responsibility on our shoulder. There is no such thing as a community is going to do the job. Each one of us is responsible to do our part. And I like the observation by Dr. Nabil that we're going to have to earn our place and not force ourselves, but earn respect and not even rely on the law or anything, but prove ourselves by raising a generation who are very ambitious, with very high aspirations. They don't settle for a bachelor or master or even PhDs, but they try to excel in science and excel in every place they find themselves in, so that they can be a good ambassador of this religion, to make up or offset the damage to the image that is to the image of Islam and Muslims that is done partly by the backwardness of the Muslim countries and Muslim world, and also by the horrible or crazy acts that are done in the name of Islam. The damage is big. Islam needs a complete reconstruction, because it's not like one piece of it was damaged. It's a whole paradigm has collapsed, and everybody ended up with some pieces. They think that's it. That's what Islam is. So there is a big job for us, big responsibility to reconstruct this paradigm. Beautiful Islam, the original, beautiful, inspiring, and empowering Islam, minus all the mess and all the confusion and all the negative cultural elements that were injected in it. And that's what we have been doing. And part of it is to emphasize this idea that Quran was meant to be valid for all times and all places, but not every verse of it can be valid for all times and all places. Because it was meant to be valid for all times and all circumstances, it came flexible. And then it came separated into two categories. One of them is principles and values that do not change, and this is one of them that we are discussing. And others are rules and contextual things that apply in a certain context. That confusion created a lot of problem. And unfortunately, some people came up with this idea of nasakh, that any verse they don't like, they say it was superseded. And it seems that the only verses that are left in Quran are the verses of fighting. That's everything else was nasakh, was mansukh. So very, very damaging. We lost priorities, we lost our compass, and we need to re-establish that. The foundation of this deen is the Tawheed, then there is a mission, and then there are maqasid. If you want to rebuild Islam, we don't rebuild it from the roofs or from the walls or decoration, but from the foundations. This is how we can re-establish the original paradigm of Islam, is that Islam is essentially a relationship between you and Allah, that nobody should interfere with it. It's you work on that relationship to produce that vibrant spirituality, that self-restraint, that trying always to perfect everything you do, because that's what Allah expects you to do. Try to realize all your potential. Try to be on a path of continuous improvement. Try to maximize your contribution to the greater good. That's Islam. That's the commitment that you make when you come to Islam. And then as you're coming to Islam, there is a mission that you are embracing. You have tried to understand it, very well and fulfill it to the best of your ability. This mission can be summarized, even though you need to work on it, to master it, to have an in-depth understanding of your mission and your role. But we can summarize, because also it can vary from one place to another, at least some parts of it or some aspects of it. But if you want to summarize it, it's basically your mission in this life is to develop yourself into a role model and be all you can be, and to maximize your contribution to the greater good and your positive impact on people. And that's it. You want to summarize, you do it in pursuit of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's tazkiyah and islah. The first Quran called tazkiyah, which is self-development, to be all you can be, to realize your potential. And also tazkiyah can be used as in the context of mentoring and coaching people and unlocking their potential to help them be all they can be. Because tazkiyah in Quran is mentioned in the two contexts. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. And then يُزَكِّيهِمْ, that the Prophet was doing this. Part of his job description was tazkiyat people, meaning uplifting them. So there is self-development and there is uplifting. And then there is this islah, beautiful word. It just makes things better. Wherever you settle, try to make things better, get engaged civically, reach out to people, be involved, try to improve the conditions, the policies, the social norms, push them toward to become more just and more fair and just and more virtue in the society, and of course more peace and more security and more prosperity. That's what Islam is all about. You take this and then you messed up if it collapses. Of course, the goals, this is the mission, and then it is directed by goals, which I listed them as 6 or 7. Justice in Quran is the main goal of this religion. That's a verse in the Quran, in Surah Al-Hadid. لقد أرسلنا رسلنا بالبينات وأنزلنا معهم الكتاب والميزان ليقوم الناس بالقسط. Very clear that all messengers, all books, everything was meant to establish justice. So that becomes the overarching goals or the ultimate goal. And then you can deduct or get other maqasid or overarching goals. Islam came to make people free or to free people. And all of these can be proved. There are evidence for this. We can dedicate a session to free people from everything that holds them back, or from any oppression, or from any suppression, or from any. And then to guarantee the dignity of a human being, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, and then to make sure that this world is peaceful and secure, and all of this, as I said, there are evidence for this. And then to enhance and improve virtues, make societies more, and then make things prosper, or to develop. هو الذي أنشأكم من الأرض واستعمركم فيها, settled you on earth to develop it. That's all. That's Islam in a nutshell. Now, if you compare that to the understanding that are prevalent now, and they are being introduced to young people or to non-Muslims, you find no comparison. We introduce Islam sometimes starting with not eating pork, and we introduce Islam to our children and say, if you don't pray, you're going to be sent to hellfire. It's total mess. So there is a lot of work that need to be done to go back. And then there are a number of things that we have to fix that led to this. One of them is what we're doing here, is that we were told that you cannot understand Quran and you should not even try because it's not for you and you don't need, because Islam is clear already, we know what we are supposed to do. So many Muslims abandoned or did not make any effort to understand the Quran. That's very bad. Yeah. Even though Quran is exactly the opposite, it was made easy and simple for people to try to understand it. It's very eloquent, beautiful. You spend your life studying it and enjoying doing that. And then with one statement, we caused all Muslims to lose any motivation to study the Quran. Why? Because you don't have to, and you're not equipped. And then we created the clergy in Islam, which we should not have, that only some people can understand it. And that's, even though Islam was totally against this, it's direct relationship between you and Allah, and you make an effort to try to understand the Quran. And then we replace that by Sunnah. Sunnah is, it's a mixed bag. A hadith, that we were told that some hadith are authentic. A hadith were documented a long time after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. A lot of efforts were done into this hadith, great efforts, but it's still a human effort. It can never be 100%. Every scientist will tell you that there is no such thing as 100%. There is no such thing that somebody will sort out 600,000 hadith and come out with 7,000, and you tell me that he did not miss authentic hadith and he did not include hadith that is not authentic, that his work was 100%, then it becomes Quran. Yeah. That's not true. That's a human effort. And unfortunately, when they did this, they focused more on the chain of narration, but they did not focus on the content, and that's bad. And then when they see a content that is not consistent with the Quran, they go to try to twist the interpretation of the verse of the Quran to match that particular hadith, so that they cannot say that Bukhari made a mistake here. I mean, should not include this hadith. That's very simple. I mean, he's not infallible. We did that, and then even we abandoned the hadith. See how much damage we did. And then, of course, before that, we stopped the ijtihad, and that's very, very bad decision, because the only way this religion can continue to be relevant and fresh is through ijtihad, because it is fixed, the text is fixed, and life is evolving. There is no way except that ijtihad. That's how now you decide to stop ijtihad, you make it irrelevant. You think that you are preserving it. No, you're spoiling it. Quran is not food. You don't spoil it. You don't preserve it by putting it in freezer. You preserve it by keeping it alive, always subject to fresh understanding and interpretations. So the original paradigm collapsed. Don't study the Quran because you don't have to and you cannot. And then focus on the Sunnah. And the Sunnah is, we did not even do it right. And then we abandoned the Sunnah and we stopped ijtihad, and then we relied on books of Turath. And somebody in 2020 still does not want to think and rely on Ibn Kathir said and Ibn Taymiyyah said, and they did their job during their time. They confronted the problem of their time. They probably got something right and other things wrong, but it's about time that for us to do the same job for our time. And if and I don't say even the scholars, even the companions. I mean, companions made ijtihad after Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I mean, there is something major change happened with the death of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which is that there is no deen after that. Everything became ijtihad. Why? Because there is no validation from wahi, from revelation. So if the companions use their intellect to make ijtihad, why we cannot do that? I mean, what's prevent us? I mean, if Umar ibn Khattab made major ijtihad in verses in Quran, clear-cut verses, and more than one, and that's after a few years after the death of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and in the same environment, in the same context, in the Arabian Peninsula, in the same environment. You tell me that somebody after 14, 15 centuries and in a completely different context, and you said, no, you cannot, you don't use your intellect, you cannot try to make interpretation or ijtihad, you should rely on the work, and not even the work of Umar al-Khattab, but the work of this scholar or that scholar. Yeah. That's, I can't imagine, it hardly could be worse. What we did to our religion, it hardly could be worse. Of course, and all of this was toppled with the recent wave of this intercontinental terrorism. They call it jihad. They go from state to place and fighting in the name of Islam and committing horrible things like this idea of the cartoons. By the way, this idea of cartoons, I'd like to elaborate on the point that Dr. Nabeel mentioned, which is the reaction that people have done to the cartoons. Now, first of all, that violates religion itself. Now we start with the fundamental, because even at the time of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he was mocked, and he didn't do that to people. He didn't kill people. وَلَقَدْ نَعْلَمُ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the end of Surah Al-Hijr, وَلَقَدْ نَعْلَمُ أَنَّكَ يَضِيقُ صَدْرُكَ بِمَا يَقُولُونَ فَسَبَّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَكُنْ مِنَ السَّاجِدِينَ وَاعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينُ. Now we know that you are hurt by what they say. He didn't tell, Allah didn't tell Rasul to go and kill them. Go and seek more spiritual exercise to strengthen yourself to deal with these attacks. So that's by itself is wrong. And it is relied. It's based on some ahadith that are very questionable. The surah is Surah Hijr, Al-Hijr, and it's at the end, 97, 98, and 99. Surah Al-Hijr is Surah 15. And there are other places in which Rasul was directed that Allah is telling him that we know what you are facing. And that's one of the reasons those prophets who are chosen to that they have that patience and resilience so that they can deal with these things. Rasul in Mecca and Medina, it's not because he was weak. It's not. There is no such thing as somebody says a bad word about the prophet, you go and kill him. There is nothing. There are some hadith very questionable that Rasul encouraged or approved people to go and kill somebody because he said bad things about Rasul. He bashed Rasul. Very questionable. Whether it is Ka'b al-Sharaf or there are two cases, two hadith, very questionable. The way they are narrated makes you really question their authenticity, irrespective of the chain of narration, but very questionable that Rasul will endorse or will approve something like this or encourage people to do that and to do it in the way they have done it. So that's one. Second, it's a violation of fiqh al-ma'alat. What's fiqh al-ma'alat? Fiqh al-ma'alat, it's basically if you want to fix something and it's going to lead to bigger damage or bigger problem, don't do it. Quran teaches us this and the Rasul teaches us this. Quran teaches us when he talks about khamr and maysir. سألونك عن الخمر والميسر يقول فيهما إثم كبير ومنافع للناس. طيب they're teaching us to weigh the benefits and the harm. That alcohol and gambling, there are some benefit for people, but there are some harm. But the harm outweighs the benefit. So that's why they were forbidden. Why? Because the harm outweighs the benefit. طيب Hadith Rasul sallallahu talking to Aisha about the Kaaba. Kaaba before Rasul sallallahu long time before Rasul sallallahu was destroyed by a flood. So Quraysh at that time did not have enough money. So when they want to rebuild it, they rebuild it smaller than the original Kaaba. Smaller. That's all. They couldn't afford to rebuild it with the original size. Rasul sallallahu talking to Aisha, looking at the Kaaba, he wanted to destroy Kaaba and rebuild it to the original size. What did he tell her? لولا أن أهلك حديث عهد بالإسلام. And if I'm not worried about the reaction of people when they see the Kaaba destroyed, maybe their faith will be shaken, I would destroy the Kaaba and then rebuild it. But I'm not going to do it because fearing or worried about the reaction. Like, these people, first of all, it was wrong. The killing is wrong and horrible act. طيب, let's see the consequences. I mean, 2016 or even before has been wild. طيب, let's see the consequences. This is, as Dr. Nabil said before, Salman Rushdie was nakira, unknown, virtually unknown, and he became a star. طيب, this newspaper was unknown. And limited people see it, limited number of people. And I'm sure the majority of those did not pay attention to the cartoon. Maybe did not see it. Everybody takes the newspaper for a different reason, or reads the newspaper for a different reason. Very few people read the newspaper, all of it. Like, you do this, as a result, everybody in the world want to see those cartoons, and they saw it. And everybody and the newspaper became one of the most known famous newspapers يعني. طب ما this is stupid يعني. This is stupid. Forget about and it's wrong and horrible crime, but this is stupid يعني. يعني to do this to your religion, it's stupid يعني. طيب, as a result, we ended with get this chain reaction that basically يعني didn't cause us any benefit. In addition to it is wrong, but even weighing the benefit and the harm, it kept Muslims in the news always associated with the problem, not with the solution or with contribution or with something good. Yeah, that people will hear about Muslim in the news only there is a mess or there is confusion or there is tension or there is a problem or there is civil war or there is an act of terrorism or there is this and there is that. That's what happened all these years. Now, forget about Macron. I mean, this is very deeply secular country that you don't expect. I mean, whatever he does, it should not trigger automatic reaction. You should always consider your options and weigh and go, first of all, with the lawful option that will produce maximum benefit and minimum harm, but shouldn't be emotional. And that applies to everything. Applies to everything that we should consider. To take it easy, take a deep breath, right? This is Macron. That's what he did. That's what he said. Very provocative. It's very bad even for his own country. Like, how to deal with it? What are our options? Let's limit ourselves only to the lawful Islamically, and legal, because abiding by the law is part of honoring contract. And we are instructed to honor our contract in Islam. And then within that boundaries, what are our options? And let's see which options will produce maximum benefit and minimum harm. But just go and react just out of emotions, it's not appropriate. Now, going back to the principle of La Ikraha fi Din, and I think that this is probably the first thing that we need to teach everybody about Islam. One of the first things, probably immediately after Tawheed, is to tell them that La Ikraha fi Din, that in this religion, you're not responsible for what people decide. You're not responsible to convert them. You are not responsible to judge them. Your job is to be good ambassador of this faith, embody the great teachings of Islam, and deliver it in the best possible way whenever you have a chance. Don't be pushy, don't force yourself on people. Whenever you have a chance, just do it the right time, the right way, with the right dose. Do it with people you know, people who ask, things like that. But what you need to do 24/7 is the presenting Islam by example. Like, compare that to what we're doing. You find almost there is no comparison. So present Islam by example 24/7 and be able, learn Islam, master the concept of Islam so that you can introduce it in a convincing way whenever you have a chance. That's all. You find this principle emphasized in many places. One of them actually in Surah Al-Baqarah, with the same level, by the way. La ikraha fi din is just one verse. In Surah Al-Baqarah, in the verses that we'll consider, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet, لَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ هُدَاهُمْ. طيب, could it be more explicit than this? لَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ هُدَاهُمْ. Verse 272. Baqarah, Surah 2, verse 272. لَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ هُدَاهُمْ. I'm looking for the translation. It is not for you to guide them. It is not for you, Prophet, to guide them. It is Allah who guides whoever He will. Very obvious, very clear. لَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ هُدَاهُمْ. How many times you heard this verse from in a khutbah or in Islamic lectures or etc.? لَا إِكْرَاهَ فِي الدِّينِ, which is more known, people don't emphasize on it. وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ, that the brother mentioned, people don't emphasize. فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Say the truth from your Lord. whoever chooses to accept it and whoever chooses to reject it. I mean, free will, that's one of the essential things in the composition of the human being. It's the intellect, the ability to distinguish, and the right to choose. To choose, that's what makes a human being special. That's how Allah created him. طيب. We go to Surah Yunus. Surah Yunus is Surah 10. Surah 10, verse 99.
Dr.
Surah
Ghannouchi,
10,
what was
yes.
the verse number in Surah Al-Baqarah?
272.
272.
It starts by لَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ هُدَاهُمْ. Yunus, Surah 10, verse 99. ولو شاء ربك لآمن من في الأرض كلهم جميعا أفأنت تكره الناس حتى يكونوا مؤمنين. طيب, I don't know how more explicit Quran can be. ولو شاء ربك لآمن من في الأرض كلهم جميعا. يعني if this is your wish, Allah, if he wanted, he could have done this. We know that the Prophet, that's what he wants, but out of compassion, he wants everybody to understand and accept religion. Like Quran says, this is Surah Yunus 99, 10:99. Had your Lord willed, all the people on earth would have believed. So, can you, Prophet, compel people to believe? أفأنت تكره الناس حتى يكونوا مؤمنين. طيب, Surah Al-Kahf is clear. There is one verse, قل الحق من ربكم من شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر. But in the beginning of Surah Al-Kahf, فلعلك باخع نفسك على آثارهم. Is it? Because there is twice. There is one in Al-Kahf and one in Shu'ara. Let's see here. In Surah Al-Kahf, فلعلك باخع نفسك على آثارهم إن لم يؤمنوا بهذا الحديث أسفا. Please listen to this verse, Surah Al-Kahf, Surah 18, verse number 6. Surah 18, verse number 6, to see that how messed up our beautiful religion became, unfortunately. Hijacked by a small minority that caused a lot of damage. طيب. Prophet, are you going to worry yourself to death over them if they don't believe in this message? Are you going to, what does it say? But Prophet, are you going to worry yourself to death over them if they do not believe in this message? Yani the Prophet, first of all, it's not your job to guide them. And now the Prophet, out of compassion, he was at pain. I mean, feeling bad for these people that they are not accepting this great gift from God, this great guidance, to the point that he was stressing himself out. And Quran is coming to take it easy on yourself, basically because it's not your job. I mean, so in one verse says if Allah will, he could have made everybody Muslim. If that's what you want, Allah could have done this, but they chose not to do it. And here say, don't kill yourself over the fact that they did not accept your message. And the same principle was emphasized again in Surah Shu'ara. Surah 26, chapter 26, verse 3. Yani Surah Shu'ara, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the same word actually. لعلك باخع نفسك ألا يكونوا مؤمنين. طيب, are you going to kill yourself just because these people did not accept the message? إن نشأ ننزل عليهم من السماء آية فظلت أعناقهم لها خاضعين. And Allah, so let's get the right translation. In Surah 26, the poets, Shu'ara, Prophet, are you going to worry yourself to death because they will not believe? If we had wished, we could have sent them down a sign from heaven at which they would bow their heads in utter humility. And then we could have showed them either miracle, we could have forced them, we could have done something. Allah is talking to make them believers. But again, it's not your problem. You should not feel bad about it if you deliver the message. And all of this is, we can conclude these verses by the verse from Surah Al-Ra'd. Surah Al-Ra'd, Surah 13, verse 40. إنما عليك البلاغ وعلينا الحساب. Exclusively, your job is exclusively to deliver the message. إنما على سبيل الحصر. That's your job is exclusively to deliver the message. And the judgment is for us, is reserved to Allah. Very clear. We leave all of this and then we accept somebody who takes a verse that is contextual, not a principle. These are principles in Islam. Or somebody takes a hadith, or somebody brings an incident from the seerah that is questionable, whether it really happened or not, or of course, if it is from the books of the Torah or heritage, or from the history of Islam, and try to build on it acts or understanding or philosophy or methodology. This is as ridiculous as it can get. So keep this in mind. Let's try, all of us, to work on reconstructing Islam. First of all, rediscovering it and reconstructing, because it's the whole paradigm collapsed. And then now you can find minor things blown out of proportion become essential. Some essential things were neglected, and a lot of twisting and even mutilation happened to Islam to end up with this kind of Islam that produced this kind of nations and this kind of societies that unfortunately, not only in the Muslim world, but even when they have a chance to thrive, alhamdulillah, in this country, probably we're doing, as Muslims, probably we're doing better job than Muslims in many other places in the world. We have people who really have considered success stories. But I think given the opportunities and given the potential we have, we could do a lot better than this. We have a lot of untapped potential, and there are a lot of untapped opportunities. So I'm going to stop here for this subject, and then we see if we have more discussions and more questions, and we'll see how we do the rest of the session.
Dr.
أيمن تفضل أخي أيمن.
Oh, thank you. Dr. Ranushi, what was the verse number في Surah Al-Shu'ara?
3. Verse 3.
Okay, thank you.
Surah 26, verse 3.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, this has been a great topic, and I encourage everyone, all the participants, to ask any questions that they have, either by speaking up or sending that question via chat. So please feel free. I am also one of the students of Dr. Ranushi. I have been attending his lectures for over 2 years. So I encourage everyone to join us and to learn about the intended message of Islam. There is, like Dr. Ranushi said, Islam has been misrepresented to Muslims by Muslims themselves, unfortunately. So what I would like to touch on is one topic related to what Dr. Ranushi said, is the topic of tolerance. There's a lot of intolerance among Muslims. In fact, among Muslims themselves, and intolerance to those outside Islam. So, and I think it starts with the way we raise our kids. And, they, unfortunately, it's a cycle from one generation to another. And we teach them, they learn from us to be judgmental. And as a result, they start judging,
I have a question, please.
yeah, one second. I will finish in 2 or 3 minutes. So what happens is there's a little bit. So we don't teach our kids tolerance as they grow up, and they become basically they learn from the parents, or they learn from their friends at the mosque to be judgmental. Anybody that does not share our ideas or our beliefs, or thinks the way that
Yes, Brother Ayman, we stopped hearing you. You're breaking off.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So basically, the idea is that I want to stress, and Dr. Ghannouchi, you could probably expand on it because I just have a bad connection, is that we don't teach our kids tolerance. And because of that, they grow up to be judgmental. And unfortunately, this is a habit or a trend among Muslims. A lot of Muslims is that they are judgmental, and they're quick to judge, and there's no tolerance to other ideas, whether it's within your sect or to sects outside, say Sunnis towards Shiites, or Shiites towards Sunnis. So it's almost as if the trend right now, and the culture, the way we teach Islam, prepares our kids to be recruited by these hate groups. And it's easy for these hate groups to recruit them and to brainwash them because they have a very shaky foundation. A lot of they misunderstand Islam a lot. So, for example, we had in my local mosque, we had differences. We had disagreement on a topic of basically prayer. And there were fatwas that were provided to show, hey, this form of prayer, this way of praying during Ramadan using Zoom is acceptable. However, a lot of people started attacking those Muslims that wanted to do virtual prayer. And it got to the point where some people were attacked and told, oh, you're not a real Muslim. So, it's unfortunate. It's almost like, because of the judgmental attitude, it's almost as somebody feels that they have been ordained by Allah to judge other Muslims and other people. So it's very damaging.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. Ayman?
Can I say something now?
Brother Hussam, if you have a question, if
Go ahead.
Brother Ayman finish.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. I will elaborate on your point. Go ahead.
I just have a little notes about the إكراه الناس حتى يكونوا مسلمين. I wish somebody tell me where is that happen and when these days. But I see that the people going to Islam, as the Dr. Ghannouchi says, by our reaction and our acting and our behaviors and our good attitudes and our how we deal with the problems and all this stuff. And I just want to be that what we say about إكراه الناس حتى يكونوا مسلمين, but I don't think this has happened in any part. this is my opinion. And what we concentrate is, as I said before, our behaviors and our acting, all of this stuff. And also, this is one point. The other point is the people who go for demonstration or make some violence about they say about Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. This is just like an ghira on Rasul. I think if just one any one guy is just shatam abuk or ummak or kaza, I will kill you, I will do all this, and you hate him, and you do. Maybe if he is a good friend, you just cut his relation with you. This is something about Rasulullah sallallahu that our iman never complete till we love him more than ourselves. Our
Hussein,
iman not complete till
السلام عليكم.
we love Rasulullah more than ourselves. So the action what's happened is some of them I know it's run by wrong way, but most of other action is going well. And at the same time, the foreign countries that we know, this is the only way to explain ourselves about one idea or what's happened here in the United States, in Europe, and anything. That's what they do. They make a demonstration.
Hussein, you're talking about the wrong subject. Nobody talked about the demonstration. We talked about the killing. I didn't talk about the demonstration. I talked about the killing.
Anyhow, I don't know who killed you. Who killed?
No, the killing of the newspaper, the journalist, the original killing, the people who went to the newspaper and killed journalists. That's the one I talked about. I didn't talk about peaceful demonstration. No.
Yeah, this is something. They kill people, hundreds of thousands of people without any reason, without anything. Anyhow, this is something happened.
Mistakes are not to be fixed by mistakes. Yeah.
واحد بس هو اللي عمل الأكشن ده من دماغه.
We're still.
So I can't judge all the Muslims that I
nobody talked about Muslim. Yeah,
what's right and what's wrong.
Brother Hussein, you're talking about many things that were not mentioned at all. Yeah, you are responding to things that did not mention at all. Yeah.
No. The main point, just to إن أنا أقول إن إكراه الناس على الإسلام does not happen now. وحضرتك قلت كل الآيات اللي لا إكراه في الدين ولعلك باخع نفسك وكل ده I don't believe it. That's happened now.
طيب خلينا ممكن أرد عليك.
It's good. It's okay. It's all right. It's not wrong. But the problem is that I don't see it now. I don't see it. Where and when?
Yeah, Brother Hussein, can I explain to you, please? And I didn't say, and there are people now who are doing this, and you answered all the points you mentioned. I did not mention them yet. And I appreciate your points, but they're not in response to what I said. You talked about other points, which are good, but they have nothing to do with that I said. طيب. Ikrah, and we're talking about judgmental attitude. Is that for you to sit down and to start saying who's Muslim, who's not Muslim, who's going to go to hell, who's going to go to heaven, as if you have, Allah gave you the criteria to decide, well, I gave you the key. Yani. This is something that we want to get it out of the minds of Muslims. And we're using these verses for that reason. That الحساب مش عليك. And to stay away from حساب. Who's the فرقة الناجية? Who's going to go to heaven? Who's going to go to hell? We are not ضامنين أنفسنا. We're not guaranteeing ourselves to go to heaven.
100%. I agree with you 100% for this point, but I am sorry. Maybe I misunderstanding. Dr. Anousi, I am sorry. Maybe I misunderstanding, but you concentrate about لا إكراه في الدين, لا إكراه في الدين, لا إكراه. مسألة judgment nobody accepted. Nobody accepted. I agree with you 100%. But I talk about another. What's the more verses you say mention?
جايك في الكلام. الجادجمنتال اتيتود هو اللي يؤدي or leads. طيب هذا كافر Then the question, what should we do with him? Then comes a scholar and say, we have to force him or we have to kill him. Then comes somebody to execute. This is the chain that we have been suffering from. Right? People are nowadays, you have seen what Daesh has done in parts of Iraq. If you think, if these people have power in any countries of the world, do you have any doubt they're going to force religion on people? No, they will, because they believe in that. But they are not doing it now because they don't have the means. They don't have the power. But whenever there are some groups, wherever they had power, wherever in the world, they try to impose a religion on people or punish people because they did not accept Islam. We cannot deny these are facts. Yeah. So if they are not doing it now, it's there. It's dormant. Why? Because they are not capable. They don't have the means. But we have seen, we have seen what Daesh has done to the people in Iraq who are not Muslims. Rape, killing, they did everything bad to them. Why? Because they are not Muslims. And they have fatwas for that. So let's not live in denial. Yeah. Let's not live in denial. Our religion is great. We want that great religion to be delivered to people. No, brother Hussam. It's not
because now all the people in the world know that Daesh is built from Israel and United States.
Good, go and convince people with this.
I don't judge them, but he's not a Muslim and he kill a Muslim. You say that? Okay.
Brother Hussam, let's give the chance to other people. There are other people want to ask questions. Jazakallah khair.
Okay.
Brother Amina, go ahead, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustad. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the enlightenment on tolerance. My question is also part of this, I think, is the misunderstanding of the verse on Trinity. And I think that's where judgment comes. So like, how are we supposed to understand the Islamic view about Trinity? That's like the verse that says that no three, لا تقول ثلاثة. I forgot but can you please elaborate more, and how are we to incorporate that in terms of compassion that our Deen has explicitly imposed? Thank you.
If you want to understand Trinity, it's just for the purpose of understanding the religion of people you are living with, not to judge anybody. It's part of your da'wah effort, because if you want to do da'wah to any person, you have to understand that person, not only their beliefs, their circumstances, their personality, etc., because that's the most effective way of da'wah. It is also needed for people who live in the same society to understand each other religion. It's like a Christian will understand Islam as whether they embraced or not, that's their decision. But it should stop there. It should not cross the limit to start getting who is a Christian, who is a kafir, who's a Christian, where this Christian is going to go. And that's not our job. That's not our job. So understanding, for Muslims here, they may have to understand some Christian denominations. Muslims in China, they have to understand Buddhism. It's just part of understanding the people that you live with, so that when you want to present Islam, you know whom you're talking to. Because Islam is not like one size fits all. It should not be presented the same way everywhere. It's like treatment. It's like a treatment or like a solution. It depends. You have to understand that the person. So I'm totally for people understanding each other, because that's what Quran says. خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. And try to understand each other, because that's the only way society can be peaceful, can be coherent, because bigotry thrives on ignorance. I mean, those bigots, the right wings, the people, the racist people, etc., they thrive on ignorance. When people don't know each other, that's what gives them the opportunity. The more people know each other and accept each other, the more that they will seal the door in front of bigotry and open the door of tolerance and coexistence and mutual respect and cooperation for the greater good, etc. So that's what we want to do in every society. And by the way, that does not apply only to our society. There is no society that is pure ethnically, religiously. Even if all of them are Muslims, you find different madahib or different sects, etc. Or if all of them are Christian. So every society has some level of diversity, and it is very important for people, for the well-being of the society, that people understand each other. And part of understanding is, of course, understanding religion. So you want to study Trinity or the beliefs, what some different Christian denominations have their beliefs, especially if you have like friends of yours or neighbors or colleagues, etc. That's a good idea. But let's not get into waste our time or busy ourselves with something wrong that Allah reserved for himself, to get to the point and start classifying people and categorizing and deciding who's going to go to hell and how much, what punishment, and all of this is not our job. Hisab was reserved completely to Allah.
Brother Iyad, go ahead. Iyad Hindu.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Suhail, for the enlightenment. I loved in particular when you started and said that the sort of priority list is first Tawheed, then mission, and thirdly maqasid, or the intentions of Sharia. And I'd like to ask you a question regarding Tawheed. When we say Tawheed, we have this old-fashioned, or what we know about Tawheed and al-Wala al-Bara and the other practices. So in this new understanding of rediscovering our religion, what does Tawheed mean here? What does it imply for us to understand differently? Jazakallah khair.
Beautiful question, very good. The Tawheed that we received, like the maqasid that we received, very dry, and they're not, I mean, when everybody will talk about maqasid in Islam, say hifd al-mal, hifd al-nafs, hifd al-din, which is good, which is all true. But we never elaborated on those to turn them into like something that dynamic, something that you can apply. And we kept just memorizing what are the goal maqasid sharia. They are hifd al-din, hifd al-mal, hifd al-nafs, etc., hifd al-ard, protecting religion, protecting life, protecting, etc., which are good, but we should have elaborated and turned them into practical things and like platforms and etc., that rather than memorizing statements. Same thing with Tawheed, exactly the same thing. What is Tawheed? Tawheed, this wala wa bara, لا اسماء بدون تعطيل وتشبيه أو يعني very memorizing some statements that have no implication, they have no consequences. Tawheed, for the way I see it, is that you're dedicating yourself and your life to Allah and His cause. That's what you do when you come to Islam. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, that's the meaning of it. The first part is that you're pledging to dedicate yourself and your life to Allah and to His cause. So become somebody who's living to fulfill Allah's purpose in pursuit of Allah's pleasure. That's the commitment that you make. Tawheed, this commitment results in those three things: the Tawheed, the mission, and the goals or overarching goals or maqasid of Islam. So you're making that commitment to Tawheed, to fulfill that mission, to achieve those goals. What is this piece of Tawheed? The piece of Tawheed is that you are going to dedicate your life to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to establish and maintain and strengthen very strong and vibrant relationship with Him. It's about spirituality that was killed, unfortunately, because of the dry version of Islam that came from the desert. It's the different aspects of your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tawakkul, love, gratitude, ta'zeem, all aspects of that relationship. It's like you go to the gym to build your muscles. there is a machine that every machine builds a certain muscle. There are work that you need to do to develop those different aspects of your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are ways to do that. There are ways to work. First of all, Rasul says, Man araf Allah ahabbah. So that tells you exactly, that shows the way that you get to know Allah. The more you know Him, the more you love Him. And then we want to introduce Allah to our children and to people through the door of love, not the door of fear. Because fear will push you to do the minimum. Love will motivate you to do your utmost, your best. And even the fear that I think should be, first of all, love and then gratitude. These are much more powerful engines of to motivate you to worship and to serve the cause of Allah. And even the fear, before we get to the fear of punishment, which should be the last resort, there is the fear of not living to the expectation of Allah. It's like haya, not the fear of, it's like you feel, you are worried or concerned or fear that you fall short of the divine expectations. That's a big motivator. And then if everything fails, there is only the fear of punishment, which we introduce at first and the only one. How we work on that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not mystery, because some people will tell you that you're talking to me about love of Allah. I don't find it in my heart. No, you have to develop it. It doesn't come by itself. The best sources, ways, or tools, practical tools that are available for everybody. But then we don't, when it gets to the action items, we don't do it, or we don't implement. One is the Quran. Studying the Quran is the best way to develop and strengthen your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the Quran is a book about Allah. It's not only a book from Allah, it's also a book essentially about Allah. So study the Quran will result in that strong, vibrant relationship and spirituality. It's like when you eat healthy, you maintain good health, physical health. Same thing for spiritual health. That's the way to nourish your spirituality. Another way is the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a very powerful tool most Muslims neglected. This is how Allah introduced Himself for us. This is like through those names. And those names, each one of them will strengthen one aspect of your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Beautiful names, wonderful. Very few Muslims know them all. And even those who memorize them, I don't know how many they understand them. The third is contemplation on the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tafakkur fi khalq as-samawati wal ard. That this universe, the human body, educating yourself, you don't have to be a scientist, or they don't have to be your specialty. Nowadays, there are a lot of resources available for non-science major to educate themselves about the human body, about the universe, about the physical aspect and the human or social aspect. All of these are governed by rules that Allah embedded them in the universe. And the early Muslim, when they understood Islam properly, they were very active in discovering those rules and leveraging them to fulfill their mission, and also to strengthen your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء. And then verse in Surah Ali Imran mentioned the two together in one verse. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم. That's the spiritual part. They are always connected to Allah. ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض. And the conclusion, ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا. It will strengthen their belief that this was created for a purpose, and that you are here to have a big mission to fulfill, and strengthen that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, studying the personality and the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because that's the role model. That's the role model that Allah has chosen for us. And that's very important, very effective way to try to shape yourself up into the profile that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the profile of the Prophet, that's the perfect. So we should be studying and comparing comparing our worship to the worship of the Prophet, our character to the character of the Prophet, our dedication to the cause, to the dedication to the cause of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, etc. Most Muslims, they don't do that because of the wrong understanding of Islam and because of the lot of misconception that we mentioned. Because if you understand Quran as a short list of do's and don'ts, you don't need to do all of this. All of this will collapse. There is no mission. There is no need to work on Tawheed except to memorize 2 sentences. There is no need to study the Quran. There is no need to do anything. There is no mission to fulfill. So the whole paradigm collapses when Islam is introduced as a short list of do's or fara'id and short list of kabair to avoid. And that's it. And if you do that, then you're fine. You're waiting for your time to go to heaven, and there is no need for you to bother of studying or pushing yourself or developing or being engaged. Or there is no need for all of this. That's the biggest damage that we caused to Islam when we started defining it and introducing it the wrong way. And we turned from great guidance and mission and goals and etc. into a short list of tasks that there are few things to do and few things to avoid.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Ghannouchi. Can we go up to 2 o'clock today, because we have a lot of participants and a lot of questions? Is it possible to go?
It's up to you. I can say. It's up to you.
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بارك الله فيك دكتور غنوشي على هذا الموضوع. This is like a great and really touchable topic. So I want just to comment something about the judging people. So who gets hurt first of all by this kind of judgment is the Muslims itself between us. So we were like really suffering about this. This is the first thing. So the second thing, just I want to ask about al-iman or al-tawheed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala عندما, so when he sent Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and all the Rusul, the first thing that they emphasizing in it, and they took like the several years to convince people to be what's called Unitarian, like muwahhidin lillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is like the first thing. But at the same time, sometimes I'm really confused about الحب Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala والتقرب إليه. So which is the most the feeling that's really what's called really important to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala عندما يقول يدعوننا رغبا ورهبا, it's like there is something of balance between those things, رغبا ورهبا. So that always I want to know exactly how much percentage to put on the الرغب and how much percentage to make it in the رغب or رهب Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بارك الله فيك.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Good question. Again, all of these are ijtihad. None of us holds the truth completely, but I see that we deviated towards dropping almost every aspect of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because we are can you mute Brother Ayman? Because we are lazy, so we kept only the last thing, which is the fear, and even the fear of punishment. And that's a big mistake, because if you introduce Allah to your children based on fear only, your child will be trying to do the minimum just to avoid that punishment. And then maybe down the road, when they become independent, even that will be dropped, because that's a very weak motivator. Basically, you did not have any spare engines. And what I'd like to have is more than one engine, so that if one of them fails, the other will be working. So people will continue to be always motivated. And I'd like to have the fear of punishment, because there are two types of fear in my understanding. One is the fear of disappointing, or the fear of falling short of the expectation, which, for example, that's in your relationship with your father. Even if your father does not punish you, lot of time you don't want to fall short. You don't want to disappoint him. So it makes you try to do as much as possible, just to not to be embarrassed or not to fall short. That's even comes before punishment. And then the fear of punishment should be the last resort when everything fails. It's like an airplane or something that many engines fails, or several, and there is the last thing that will keep you going, which is makes you do the minimum at least, and don't fall below the minimum, do the fara'id and try to avoid the major sins, is that fear of punishment. But dropping everything else and keeping only that was very bad. And it raised generation who pray, they don't know why they're praying, because it's not connected to any strong tawheed, it's not rooted in any mission, it's not rooted in anything. It's done just because so that they're not thrown in hellfire. This is the way I see it. And I mentioned in previous session, I say, if you succeed to get your child to know Allah and love him, you can anchor everything later in that rooted there. Because if you manage to get your child love Allah, they will not need the punishment. They will be doing their best to please Allah. That's the natural result of love, yeah. Doing your best to please Allah, and then you can anchor everything later that you do this because this is what Allah loves and expects from you, and don't do that because that's Allah does not like it or will not be pleased with you. And unfortunately, we like to go for the shortcut, because getting your child to know and love Allah requires work. And the first thing is to do it yourself, because you cannot give that which you don't have. To do it yourself is to work on yourself to know Allah very well, and then to have that strong relationship so that your child will be influenced by example, and then to find ways to communicate this to your child in different ages, and then get them to love Allah. It requires a lot of work on yourself. It requires a lot of work in the delivery. And of course, in order to avoid all of this, we go to the shortcut. To give your child, you need to pray, because if you don't pray, you're going to hell. That's all. And your child will see that your relationship with Allah is weak, your relationship with the Quran is weak, you're not probably a role model for him, and then you're trying to teach him Islam and teach him values and principles, etc. Of course, you cannot tell people to do as you say, you can tell people to do as you do. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, the most effective way of mentoring and teaching and uplifting was by example. And there is an example in front of people. So this is what the path we should take. I know it's not going to be easy. Is work on yourself to be a role model, work on your relationship with Allah. Anything that you want your child to do it yourself. It will be communicated by example. You will not need a lot of efforts to communicate it. Work to develop yourself into a role model. Work on your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it vibrant and strong, and your job will become easier to communicate that, because it is backed by a model, by example. And then you can communicate. There are different ways. I mentioned one of them one time. Very simple part of a verse. It's not even verse. And I said, I think in the khutbah, that if we manage to communicate this verse to our children, it can make a huge difference. ما أصابك من حسنة فمن الله. If you start with your child early and linking anything good that happens in the house to Allah, and your child will hear Allah, the name of Allah, always associated with something good, everything will be, your job will become much easier, or it can be very effective too. That's part of a verse. You put it in your mind and you find ways to communicate it to your children. That Allah gave us money, Allah gave us this, etc. So your child is very good observer, will be raised always hearing the name of Allah, not associated with the punishment and hellfire, but associated with everything good that happens in life. And there are other verses. There are so many. The names of Allah, you can introduce them in a simple way to your child. But of course, after you understand them and you master them. So bottom line is, let's stop looking for shortcuts, especially if it is not effective. And let's do the right thing, even if it takes some effort and takes time and takes patience. But what's the point of doing something that doesn't work or never worked?
Go ahead, Brother Iyad.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Suhail. And just a sort of a follow-up, and I think this probably need an answer offline, which is for us to love Allah, understand better His names and so on. Do you have a list of references, like what would be good books, Arabic and English, that can introduce this topic? Also, for instance, in understanding Quran, as we all know, a lot of books in tafsir go into so many details, sometimes in the language structure and so on, and you really get lost before you get to the meaning. So are there any recommendations for sources of this knowledge that we need to educate ourselves on? And I know this might not be readily available. So if it's possible to send us a list of what you recommend in terms of specific books to read to get to that point and do our homework. Jazakallah khair.
My recommendation is for everybody to start the process before even getting any list. So start the process. The process itself will lead you to start searching and looking up and asking. And then even if they have references, we have to be critical readers, meaning that don't take anything for granted from anybody. And the hikmah or the wisdom can be scattered in different sources. But I'd like to make sure that everybody try to build that the framework that will allow you to process information and filter it. And it's like knowledge is not information, it's the ability to process information. It's the CPU, not the memory. So each one of us need to try to build that foundation or that framework so that you don't worry about consulting any resources, because now you have the ability you can go one time to a website by mistake or go twice and then find out that this is really useless, that has nothing, it doesn't add to you. And then you start filtering. Or even if you have a list of good resources, you can take from different resources and you don't rely on one particular one. So make sure two things. Make sure that each one starts this process of rediscovering our original faith by studying the sources and mainly the Quran. And of course, the authentic Sunnah, but the Quran, of course, has to take the priority. Nowadays, you find yourself reluctant to say this because people may attack you. No, the Quran has to take the priority. And start, it's like when you do research, many of us have done research, master thesis or PhD, etc., and they got into subject and then literature review, and they check with their advisor, and you're gonna have to take our religion as seriously as that, the same level. And then when you start the process, alhamdulillah, information is available, so much information available online, and then you need to try to develop that ability to process information so that I can consult different sources, and then I can select out of these some of them. And even when I select them, I still gonna be read them critically and don't take anything for granted. So, but still, I will try to do that, to compile a list. But please, everybody, let's try not to come up with any excuse that because sometimes when I encourage people reading in khutbah, everybody say, I'd like to read, I don't know what to read. Say, go to the library, please, or to the bookstore and start reading, and you will find anything useful, anything that's going to help you in hereafter or in this life. to be a better person and to succeed, that's an Islamic knowledge and good knowledge. But don't make it an excuse. So I'm not talking to you yet, of course, but let's start this process, and it's never too late. Time can make big difference. I mean, these things are not going to happen in a week or overnight or in a month, but if we are really persistent, you will see how your vision becomes clearer every day, your understanding becomes deeper every day, your understanding of your, in whether Tawheed or the mission or the maqasid or this world or your roles become always clearer, and you do them and you perform your different responsibilities and your roles in life in a better and more effective way. So don't wait, everybody, please start to embark on that life journey of understanding the whole Quran, even if it, regardless of how fast you go. Everybody is different in terms of capacity and circumstances. You may do one verse a day, one verse a week, few verses a day, whatever you can do. But with a notebook and with taking notes and with some searching the meaning, and let's change the focus in our relationship with the Quran from reading and memorization and tajweed and listening, which all of them are good, but they're not essential. The essential is the studying.
Dr. Suhail, where this idea of yuqtal come from? Just imagine American friend come to me and he asked me he want to join Islam. I will tell him, oh, be careful. After you become Muslim, if you decide to go back to Christianity, we will kill you, you know. I don't think it makes sense.
And I'm not going to say my opinion, and I'm not a faqih, but very credible scholars rejected this hadd of Ridda. Very credible contemporary scholars, and even recent history and even past history rejected hadd al-Ridda, that there is an, I mean, if it happened, it might have been contextual at certain point in time, but it's not a principle in Islam that today someone decide to embrace Islam, tomorrow decided to quit, they must be killed. No. And I firmly believe in that. I find it much more consistent with the verses that we mentioned today, is that there is no such thing as, and I started by saying it's not my fatwa, or this is something that I subscribe to, but very credible scholars. I believe, I need to double check, I believe Qardawi himself rejected hadd al-Ridda. Does not, but I know Sheikh Abu Zahra, I know others who really reject hadd al-Ridda. I think I heard it directly from Sheikh Faisal Mawlawi, rahimahullah, same thing. It's not consistent with no compulsion in religion. It's not consistent with the principles of Islam. Whether it has happened or not, because again, the books of Sirah are they are not really very accurate. Ibn Ishaq or etc. There are some Israeliyat that are there, or even in some books of tafsir. But even if it happened, it might have been contextual at certain point in time. But and I don't believe in hadd al-Ridda or killing someone because they decided to quit Islam. Yeah.
Brother Muhammad, you say you have a question?
Yes, I just want to add, when you go and start looking for books, you have to be careful, because we have, in Islam, we have several schools of thought. So if you limit yourself to one author or whatever available in the masjid, or what's the imam in the masjid tells you, you will end up in just one, maybe narrow understanding. There is a lot of, our history is very rich. Even the best tafsir, and if you read about, because Dr. Nabil, I remember, he asked about what tafsir we go to. The tafsir that we have now, if you go and search for these ayat, the one like Dr. Suhail mentioned, like لست عليهم بوكيل, لست عليهم بجبار, لست عليهم بحفيظ, all لست عليهم بمسيطر. All this, they will tell you this was cancelled or نسخت بآية السيف. You just do a small search and you will find that on the web. So you have to be careful what you read. In our culture, or whatever we received right now is actually distorted. But there is, like, if you go to Az-Zamakhshari, he's the Shaykh al-Mufassirin. He has a book called Al-Kashaf. He's from Al-Mu'tazila. Also, there's a lot of books in our history. They have different opinion. So when you start reading, just don't limit yourself to one thing. Also, if you need to read about our problems these days, I recommend for you to read Malik ibn Nabi. He has a lot of books, like Tariq al-Nahda, or a lot of Mushkilat al-Afkar fi al-Alam al-Islami, the problem of thoughts in the Islamic world. I highly recommend reading these books for Malik ibn Nabi. I think they are in English, French, and Arabic. So you have to do search, and you can, there's in the web, there's a lot of people on the YouTube. And I mean, myself, if anybody wants to talk, I'm happy to do that. جزاكم الله خير.
وإياكم إن شاء الله. جزاك الله خير محمد. By the way, I mentioned the Hadd al-Ridda. It's not only that. I mean, it's nobody should take the law in their hand, even if it is in something in the Quran. I mean, it's just to clarify. Hadd al-Ridda, and I don't believe in it at all. But even any hudud or anything, that's one of the big mistakes that are prevalent. Is some people take the law in their hand, totally abolishing the idea of there is a state and there is constitution and there are laws, and as a citizen you are signing on the constitution and you are signing to abide by the law, and that becomes a contract that you have to honor it. And especially in a country that does not interfere with your religion, does not ask you to do anything haram. So we need to make sure to emphasize this, that Muslims should, we are bound by what is lawful and then what is legal. If you don't like a law, try to work to change it in a civic way. But these things also have to be emphasized. I don't see them being emphasized enough. That things have changed nowadays. There are treaties between states. There is concept of citizenship, and there is a constitution. Even though the state that the Prophet ﷺ established was constitutional based, was based on constitution and citizenship. Whoever reads the draft, the constitution that the Prophet ﷺ drafted in Medina, you'll see a state based on constitution and citizenship, which is a very modern idea, that people, the resident of the Medina, are citizens of the Medina, and they have equal rights, and they have autonomy, and it's an amazing, especially if you think of it, that it happened like 1500 years ago.
Yeah, I would like to add a few things, Dr. Anushi. So just as you mentioned, and we talked about this before, just as you mentioned, some parents take the shortcut and they go straight to saying haram, halal. The majority of
I mean, we can't hear you.
Amen. Amen.
To start distinguishing, I'd like to everyone on the call to start distinguishing between a good scholar or a good imam with someone who's mediocre, because unfortunately, I believe a lot of our imams and in masajid are mediocre. What they do is just repeat things. There is no critical thinking. There is no explanations they don't try to focus on explaining the mission, the goals. It is very dry, and they are actually also, their capabilities are actually in question. I actually question how qualified they are to be imams. So we have to be, distinguish and understand that, just because I send my kids to the mosque, that doesn't mean that, oh, they're getting a good message. There's work that needs to be done at home, because what's being taught, or the version of Islam that's being taught is very lacking by a lot of people who are not qualified.
Yeah, it's emphasizing the same point. It's that you need to build a very solid foundation in our children, and the solid frame that has clear distinction between what is foundational and what is contextual, what is essential, what is not, and there should be no confusion there. And then it's like basically you don't isolate your child, but you inoculate them. You inoculate your child, and you let them your children, and you let them interact. The same thing for reading and knowledge. You equip them with that foundation and that CPU, and then you encourage them to read and diversify their reading and their sources, and then have that critical thinking, and always asking questions, so that nobody can fool them, nobody can deceive them. They should have that ability, that even attending lecture or reading something by very famous scholar, to say why and how, and convince me, or what's the evidence, or what's it's always more difficult approach, but that's more effective. Build the foundation, the framework, have your child to understand the foundations of their religion and the framework, etc., so that they cannot be confused or fooled or misled, and then encourage them to diversify, because now we need to correct this idea that Islamic knowledge, it's not the book written by Muslims about Islam. Islamic knowledge is the knowledge that is useful for you in this life and in the hereafter. And in hikmah, so anything that can help you becoming a better person, or fulfilling your roles more effectively as a spouse, as a parent, in your workplace, etc., as a citizen, is an Islamic knowledge, because it helps you realizing your potential, and it helps you fulfilling your mission. Because we raised the generation who do not read, and when they read, those who are committed or practicing Muslim, they read Islamic books. They think that that's the only way you understand Islam, and then they sometimes stick to one madhab or one scholar, and then start taking for granted whatever, or one group, and all of this is wrong. All of this is wrong. Shouldn't have to this brainwashing and indoctrinations, and you find yourself belonging to a group that you don't read anything outside, or you don't accept, or you're not open to any other ideas. All of these are sectarian understanding of Islam that caused us big damage. People should have a diverse knowledge, and balanced, and should have that critical mind, and of course the desire to learn, and the desire to improve. These are what we need to instill very early on.
Jazakallah kul khair.
Can I just 1 minute?
We'll ask to continue in the same subject next week.
Yeah, I have just 1 minute.
Can we wait till next week, Brother Muhammad?
Yes. There is also, we can't be just frozen on certain, as Dr. Suhail mentioned. We should be aware of modern and the history of philosophy, and the modern philosophy, and the post-modernity. I mean, if we don't understand these theories or these viewpoints, we will be unable to understand what's happening in the world these days. Lots of phenomenon that we see is actually based on changes in philosophy. And actually changing philosophy came after changing in science. Like when we have the classical physics, we have the modern philosophy. When we have relativity, we have modern theories of philosophy that changed. We don't have one source of reality. Now we have different after relativity, after Einstein. Then we have the theory of the quantum theory, and now we have postmodernism. So we have to be aware of this to understand and to be able to analyze and relate this to Quran and to Islam. I know it's not a science. I'm looking at the philosophy side of it. Jazakumullah.
Okay, Muhammad, in 1 minute, Muslims, when they understood their religion and their mission properly, they were able to digest the human civilizations before them, and then they added and led the human civilization. And because I don't believe in this concept of Islamic civilization, there is a human civilization. At certain point in time, Muslims were at the leading it and added to it. And now we are lagging behind. But just to confirm your point, they were able to digest everything that the Greek and the Romans and everybody before them reached, and then they added their input and their contribution to it. So it's very important to do that. There is no way you can add if you don't understand where humanity has reached, where we are now, what point we reached, so that you can add. Hopefully one day we will get there, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Suhail. We see you next week. Jazakallah.
Thank you for everybody. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, guys. Guys, it's 2 hours. It's too long.
الله خيرا.
جزاكم الله الخير. فراس and Muhammad.
بارك الله فيكم. جزاكم الله خير.
It's too long, 2 hours. I think it's too long, 2 hours. We are sitting on the computer for 2
But
hours.
the topic is worth it. The topic is there.
I think sometimes
next week, we have nothing to lose. We can do it next week. People, they have family, they have,
I mean, yeah, I understand, but we can have it limited to an hour and a half, but because we don't go anywhere, I think discussion like this is very important.
I have other suggestion, brother. Just I want to, if there is a possibility to make it earlier, as like 11:30, I think should be much better, because right now the changing of the hours with the salat al-dhuhr. So this is my suggestion. If you
well, 12 to 1. In winter, we used to do just 1 hour. In summer, we do it hour and a half because longer day, And right now, 2 hours, too long. This is what I think. Assalamu alaikum, guys. See you next week.
Jazakumullah khair. Alaikum assalam.
See you.